Uncovering Secrets. Olivia Reed squinted at her laptop screen, the blue light illuminating her face in the dimness of her apartment. 3 months of investigation had led to this moment. Spreadsheets of financial data that didn't add up, whistleblower testimonies, and internal memos from Blackwood Technologies. The company's revolutionary water filtration systems were supposedly bringing clean water to developing nations, but the numbers suggested something far less charitable. "Got you," she whispered, saving the documents to her encrypted drive. At 32, Olivia had built her reputation at the Metropolitan Chronicle by following her father's advice. Truth may not always be popular, but it's always necessary. The next morning, dressed in her most professional navy blazer and carrying a leather portfolio containing printouts of her evidence, Olivia waited in the sleek reception area of Blackwood Tower. The receptionist had been skeptical when Olivia requested a meeting with Julian Blackwood himself, but a carefully worded email hinting at what she knew had opened the door. "Ms. Reed." A deep voice pulled her attention upward. Julian Blackwood stood before her, 42 years of calculated success embodied in a tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair was just beginning to silver at the temples, and his eyes, a penetrating hazel, assessed her with practiced precision. "Mr. Blackwood," she replied, rising to shake his hand. His grip was firm but not domineering. "Come through to my office. I'm curious what was so urgent it couldn't be handled by our PR department." His smile didn't reach his eyes as he led her through glass doors into a corner office with panoramic views of the city. Olivia didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Your Clearwater initiative claims to have installed filtration systems in over 200 villages across Southeast Asia." She placed a document on his desk. "But according to shipping records and local government filings, less than half of those systems were actually delivered." Julian's expression didn't change. He glanced at the paper, then back at her. "And where exactly did you obtain this information?" "I protect my sources," she replied. "But that's not all. The systems that were installed are using outdated filtration technology, not the proprietary method you've patented and promoted. Meanwhile, the difference in cost has been funneled through a series of shell companies back to Blackwood subsidiaries." A muscle twitched in Julian's jaw. He walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "What is it you want, Ms. Reed?" "I want the truth for my article," she said simply. "I'd like to hear your side of the story." Julian turned, his expression unreadable. He opened a drawer in his desk and removed a checkbook. "Perhaps we could discuss an alternative. The Chronicle pays you what, $60,000 a year?" He began writing. "I'm prepared to offer you $500,000 to explore other story opportunities." Olivia stared at the check he slid across the polished mahogany. The amount would pay off her student loans, cover her grandmother's medical bills, and still leave enough to breathe easy for years. "You're trying to buy my silence," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm offering you an opportunity," Julian corrected. "Smart people recognize opportunities when they appear." Olivia stood, gathering her papers. "Mr. Blackwood, I became a journalist to find truth, not bury it. Your money can't change that." She left the check untouched. "My article runs in 3 days. If you'd like to provide an official statement, you have until tomorrow afternoon." As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "You're making a mistake, Miss Reed." She turned, meeting his gaze directly. "No, Mr. Blackwood. The mistake was thinking I could be bought." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or a grudging respect. Olivia didn't wait to analyze it. She walked out with her head high, pulse pounding in her ears. What she didn't see was Julian watching her leave, the untouched check still on his desk, his expression shifting from frustration to something far more dangerous: curiosity. Unexpected encounters. 3 days after her confrontation with Julian Blackwood, Olivia's article ran on the front page of the Metropolitan Chronicle's Sunday edition. She expected legal threats, perhaps even a lawsuit. What she didn't expect was Julian Blackwood appearing at the community center where she volunteered on Tuesdays. "You've caused quite a stir, Ms. Reed," he said, leaning against the doorframe of the small office where she was sorting donated books. Olivia nearly dropped the stack in her hands. "How did you find me here?" "I have resources." Julian stepped into the room, looking out of place in his expensive clothes. "Your article was thorough." That's generally the point of investigative journalism, she replied, placing the books on a shelf. If you're here to intimidate me, save your breath. The Chronicle's lawyers are prepared for any legal action. Julian's mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. Actually, I came to tell you that we're conducting an internal audit of the Clearwater Initiative. Several executives have been suspended pending investigation. Olivia paused, turning to face him fully. Why tell me in person? Your PR team could have sent a press release. I wanted to see the person who refused $500,000 on principle. His gaze was evaluative. You're something of an anomaly in my experience. Before she could respond, a voice called from the hallway. Olivia, could you help with the An elderly woman with silver hair and Olivia's same green eyes appeared in the doorway. I didn't realize you had company. Gran, this is Mr. Blackwood. He was just leaving. Olivia's tone made it clear the conversation was over. Julian Blackwood? The one from your article? Her grandmother's eyes widened, but instead of showing fear, she smiled warmly. Would you like some tea, Mr. Blackwood? I just put the kettle on. Gran, Olivia began. I'd be delighted, Mrs. Julian accepted with surprising grace. Reed, Eleanor Reed, come along then. Olivia, bring those donation forms when you're done. 15 minutes later, Olivia found herself in the surreal position of watching one of the country's wealthiest men sitting at a chipped formica table, drinking tea from a mug that said "World's Best Grandma," while her grandmother told stories about Olivia's childhood. She was always finding neighborhood injustices to right, Eleanor was saying. Once she organized a protest because the ice cream truck skipped our street. She was 7. Julian's laugh was genuine, a warm sound Olivia wouldn't have thought him capable of producing. That explains a lot. What brings you to our little community center, Mr. Blackwood? Eleanor asked innocently, though the glint in her eye told Olivia her grandmother knew exactly who he was. Julian set down his mug. Actually, I'm interested in your after-school tutoring program. My foundation is looking for local initiatives to support. Olivia narrowed her eyes. Since when? Since reading a certain article made me reevaluate our community engagement, he replied smoothly. Eleanor beamed. Well, we could certainly use support. Our building needs repairs, and we're always short on supplies. She stood. Let me show you around. Olivia followed as her grandmother led Julian through the center, past the leaking roof in the computer room, the outdated textbooks in the tutoring area, and finally to the main activity space where children from the neighborhood were engaged in various after-school programs. Marco, show Mr. Blackwood your science project, Eleanor called to a boy of about 10. The child approached shyly, holding a makeshift solar system model. Ms. Olivia helped me research. I'm going to win the science fair this year. Julian crouched to examine the model, asking the boy questions with what appeared to be genuine interest. Watching them, Olivia felt her certainty about Julian Blackwood waver for the first time. Later, as he was leaving, Julian handed Eleanor a business card. Have your director call my office tomorrow. I think we can help with those repairs. At the door, he turned to Olivia. I'd like to continue our conversation, Ms. Reed. Perhaps over dinner? I don't think that would be appropriate, she replied stiffly. Because of your article? Or because you're afraid you might have to revise your opinion of me? His challenge was subtle but clear. Olivia met his gaze directly. Friday, 7 o'clock. But I'm choosing the restaurant. I look forward to it. With a nod to Eleanor, Julian departed. Well, said her grandmother with a knowing smile, he's certainly not what I expected from your article. Olivia watched Julian's expensive car pull away from the curb. That's what worries me, Gran, she murmured. That's exactly what worries me. Breaking barriers. The restaurant Olivia chose was nothing like the Michelin-starred establishments Julian typically frequented. Morelli's was a family-owned Italian place where the wine came in carafes, not bottles with 4-digit price tags, and the owner knew Olivia by name. Your territory, your terms, Julian said as they settled into a corner booth. He'd surprised her by dressing down, dark jeans and a cashmere sweater rather than his usual suit. Though I admit I'm curious about your choice. My father brought me here after every school play and piano recital, Olivia replied, accepting the menu she didn't need to read. Some things shouldn't be about status or impression. Like dinner with a man you've publicly accused of corporate fraud. His tone was light, but his eyes were watchful. Exactly like that. She met his gaze unflinchingly. Why did you really come to the community center, Mr. Blackwood? Julian, he corrected. And I told you I wanted to meet the journalist who valued truth over a small fortune. $500,000 isn't small to most people. But it wasn't enough to sway you. He leaned forward. Do you know how rare that is in my world? People who can't be bought? The waiter interrupted to take their orders. Olivia's usual penne arrabbiata and, on her recommendation, the restaurant's famous osso buco for Julian. When they were alone again, Olivia asked, Were you always so cynical? Or did wealth teach you that everyone has a price? Something shifted in Julian's expression, a momentary vulnerability quickly masked. Experience taught me that. My father built his company from nothing, but he believed in people. Trusted them. He took a sip of wine. When he died, I discovered his closest friend and business partner had been embezzling for years. My father's legacy nearly collapsed because of his trust. So you decided trust was a weakness? I decided verification was a strength. Julian's smile didn't reach his eyes. But enough about me. Tell me about the journalist who takes on billionaires and volunteers at community centers. Over the next hour, their conversation flowed more easily than Olivia had anticipated. Julian listened intently as she spoke about her father's influence on her career choice, her grandmother's struggle with rising healthcare costs, and her passion for community journalism. In turn, he shared stories of building Blackwood Technologies, the sleepless nights, the risks, the failures before the successes. You're not what I expected, Olivia admitted as they shared a tiramisu. Nor you, Julian replied. Most journalists I've encountered are looking for sensationalism or a payout. Most billionaires I've investigated actually did the things they were accused of, she countered. Julian's expression sobered. About the Clearwater Initiative, you weren't entirely wrong. Olivia set down her fork. I'm listening. I delegated too much. Trusted the wrong people. His jaw tightened. The project started with genuine intentions, but somewhere along the way, profit became the priority for certain executives. I should have been more involved. That's convenient to say after being caught. It's the truth. His eyes held hers. The audit is real. We've already terminated 3 executives and we're rebuilding the initiative from the ground up. I'd like to show you if you're willing. Show me? Come to our R&D facility tomorrow. See the actual technology, meet the engineers, no PR handlers, no script, just the truth you're so committed to finding. Olivia studied him, searching for deception. Why would you do that? Julian was quiet for a moment. Because your opinion matters to me. I don't know why, but it does. The vulnerability in his admission caught her off guard. All right, she agreed. But I'll be taking notes and anything I see is on the record. I wouldn't expect less. Outside the restaurant, a light rain had begun to fall. Julian insisted on walking her to her car, holding his jacket over her head to keep her dry. I had a good time tonight, he said as they reached her modest sedan. Me too, Olivia admitted, surprised by how much she meant it. Though it doesn't change the facts of your company's actions. I'm not trying to change facts, Julian said softly. Just perspectives. His eyes dropped to her lips for a fleeting moment before he stepped back. Tomorrow, then. I'll send a car at 9. As he turned to leave, Olivia called after him. I'll drive myself, thank you. I prefer to maintain my own transportation options. Julian laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. Of course you do. Good night, Olivia. She watched him walk away, conflicted emotions churning within her. The man she'd met tonight was not the cold, calculating figure she'd confronted in his office. This Julian Blackwood was complex, flawed, and unexpectedly human. And that made him far more dangerous to her objectivity than any corporate villain could ever be. The article, the Blackwood Technologies R&D facility sprawled across a green campus 30 minutes outside the city. Olivia followed Julian through secure doors, past laboratories where engineers nodded respectfully as they passed. She scribbled observations in her notebook, determined to maintain professional distance despite the lingering memory of their dinner conversation. This is where we develop the actual filtration technology, Julian explained, leading her into a large open workspace. Dr. Patel, could you walk Ms. Reed through the new system? A woman in her 50s approached, introducing herself as the lead engineer. For the next hour, Dr. Patel showed Olivia the redesigned water filtration systems, explaining how they were more effective, more durable, and actually less expensive to produce than the ones previously deployed. Why weren't these used in the first place? Olivia asked, examining the prototype. The original team prioritized immediate deployment over perfecting the technology, Dr. Patel said carefully. There was pressure to show quick results. From me, Julian interjected. His candor surprised Olivia. I pushed timelines that were unrealistic. People cut corners rather than tell the CEO his expectations were impossible. Dr. Patel's expression confirmed his assessment. These new systems will be ready for deployment next month. We're also retrofitting the existing installations. After the tour, Julian brought Olivia to a small conference room where a table held boxes of documents. These are all the internal records related to Clearwater. Financial statements, communications between executives, everything. My lawyers advised against this level of transparency, but I want you to have the complete picture. Olivia looked at the boxes, then at Julian. Why are you doing this? Because I'm not the villain you think I am, he said simply. Negligent, perhaps. Too focused on results over methods, certainly, but not deliberately exploitative. Olivia spent the rest of the day poring over the documents. They revealed exactly what Julian had described. A corporate culture where ambitious targets led to ethical compromises, where warnings from field engineers were buried by middle management, where Julian's detachment allowed corruption to flourish unchecked. It was nearly 7 when Julian returned to the conference room. Find what you needed? Olivia looked up from her notes, fatigue evident in her face. It's complicated, isn't it? Not the black and white story I thought I was writing. Reality rarely is. He sat across from her. What will your follow-up article say? The truth. That executives exploited your inattention to enrich themselves. That you've taken steps to correct the problems once they were exposed. She closed her notebook. That perhaps the billionaire isn't the villain, but neither is he the hero. Julian smiled faintly. Fair enough. This doesn't absolve you completely, she added. Your negligence allowed exploitation to happen. I know. His expression was solemn. I've spent my career insulating myself with layers of management. Delegation became abdication. Your article was illuminating in that regard. The sincerity in his voice made something twist in Olivia's chest. She gathered her notes, needing space to think clearly. I should go. I have a lot to process. Julian walked her to her car in silence. As she unlocked the door, he finally spoke. When will the article run? Sunday, she replied. I'll file it tomorrow. Will you let me read it before it goes to print? She shook her head. That's not how journalism works. You don't get editorial approval. Not as CEO of Blackwood Technologies, he clarified. As someone who cares what you think of him. The admission hung in the air between them, charged with implications neither was ready to address. Olivia looked away. I need to maintain my objectivity, Julian. And after the article? The question carried weight beyond professional considerations. Olivia met his gaze, allowing herself to acknowledge the connection that had formed between them. Unexpected, complicated, and increasingly impossible to deny. After the article? We can talk. Back in her apartment, Olivia stared at her laptop screen, the cursor blinking accusingly at the end of her draft. The follow-up piece was factually accurate, balanced in its assessment of corporate responsibility, and utterly devoid of the emotional complexity she now felt toward its subject. Her phone chimed with a text from her editor. How's the Billionaire Takedown Part 2 coming? Need it by noon. Olivia's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The truth was her North Star always, but what was the truth here? A system that failed because of neglect and greed, yes. A man who allowed it to happen through detachment, certainly, but also a man capable of acknowledging failures, of genuine remorse, of change. Olivia's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The truth was her North Star always, but what was the truth here? A system that failed because of neglect and greed, yes. A man who allowed it to happen through detachment, certainly, but also a man capable of acknowledging failures, of genuine remorse, of change. A man who looked at her in a way that made objectivity increasingly difficult to maintain. The article she finally submitted at 2 a.m. was titled, Transparency and Transformation at Blackwood Technologies. It detailed the corporate failures with uncompromising clarity, but also acknowledged the extensive corrective measures being implemented. It was honest about both the damage done and the path toward redemption. It was the truth, complex, nuanced and uncomfortably human. After hitting send, Olivia slept fitfully, dreaming of hazel eyes and untouched checks on mahogany desks. When Sunday's paper arrived, she stared at the headline, wondering if she'd compromised her principles or simply evolved in her understanding of them. Her phone rang. Julian's name appeared on the screen. Taking a deep breath, she answered. Rewriting their story. I read your article, Julian said when Olivia answered. His voice revealed nothing of his reaction, and she held her breath. Standing by her apartment window overlooking the city where several miles away Julian was likely doing the same. It was fair. More than fair. There was a pause. Thank you for your integrity. I just wrote the truth. A more complex truth than the original story. Something shifted in his tone. My PR team is calling it a disaster. Too much admitted liability. My lawyers are furious I gave you access to those documents. Do you regret it? Another pause. No. The word carried weight. Olivia, I'd like to see you. The request hung in the space between them, layered with possibilities. I'm free this afternoon, she said finally. 3 hours later, they met at a public garden, neutral territory away from the corporate towers and newsrooms that defined their professional lives. Julian was waiting on a bench near a reflecting pool, dressed casually in a way that still couldn't quite disguise his wealth. Your article has caused quite a stir, he said as she sat beside him.
Shareholders are panicking.
The board called an emergency meeting. Are you in trouble? Nothing I can't handle. His smile was wry. Though I may have to sell a vacation home or two. Somehow I think you'll survive, Olivia replied, but returned his smile. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Julian spoke again. I've been thinking about what you said, about my detachment allowing corruption to flourish. You were right. That couldn't have been easy to hear. Necessary truths rarely are. He turned to face her. I've spent years building walls between myself and everyone else, employees, partners, even friends. After what happened with my father's company, it seemed safer. And now I'm re-examining that approach. His gaze was steady. Starting with the Clearwater Initiative. I'm going to Southeast Asia next week to see the installation sites personally, meet with local communities. Olivia raised her eyebrows. That's quite a change for someone who previously delegated everything. I had a compelling reason to reconsider my methods. His eyes held hers. Someone showed me the value of seeing things firsthand, of personal involvement. The implication warmed her despite her attempts at professional detachment. The Metropolitan Chronicle is sending me to cover the retrofitting process, she said. Your PR department approved it yesterday. Julian's surprise was evident. So we'll both be there. Maintaining appropriate journalistic distance, of course, she added, though her tone lacked conviction. Of course. His smile suggested he found the notion as unlikely as she did. A week later, Olivia found herself in a small village, watching as Julian worked alongside engineers to install a new filtration system. He'd abandoned his usual polished appearance, sleeves rolled up, hands dirty, listening intently as local leaders explained their community's needs. The transformation from detached CEO to engaged participant was striking. That evening, as they sat outside her modest hotel, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Julian handed her an envelope. What's this? Open it. Inside was a document transferring $20 million to a newly established foundation. The Eleanor Reed Community Development Fund, Olivia read aloud. Julian, what is this? Your grandmother's center was just the beginning. This foundation will support similar initiatives across the city. No strings attached, independent board of directors. He hesitated. I'd like you to chair it, actually. No one would be better at ensuring the money goes where it's most needed. Olivia stared at the document. I can't accept this. It would compromise my journalistic integrity. People would think that I'm trying to buy your favor. Julian sighed. I understand how it looks. But this isn't about you and me. It's about doing something meaningful with resources I've taken for granted. She studied his face, searching for ulterior motives but finding only sincerity. I can't chair it while working at the Chronicle. But I could recommend qualified people who would ensure it operates with transparency and purpose. I'd trust your judgment. His hand found hers, tentative yet determined. Olivia, when you came into my office that day, I saw you as a problem to solve. Now I see you as essential. The word hung between them, honest in its simplicity. Olivia felt the last of her professional distance crumbling. This is complicated. My career, your position, life generally is. Julian's fingers intertwined with hers. I'm not asking for simple. I'm just asking for a chance. Under a foreign sky, thousands of miles from where their story began, Olivia made her decision. She leaned forward, closing the distance between them with a kiss that answered questions neither had fully articulated. 6 months later, the Metropolitan Chronicle ran a special feature on the transformed Clearwater Initiative, now providing clean water to over 500 communities, with transparent accountability and local involvement. The byline wasn't Olivia Reed's. She'd recused herself from covering Blackwood Technologies to avoid conflict of interest. Instead, she wrote human interest stories about the communities being served, published in a syndicated column that quickly gained national attention. She maintained her integrity, her voice, and her independence, prerequisites for the relationship that had grown between her and Julian. The Eleanor Reed Foundation flourished under the direction of community leaders Olivia had recommended, while Julian dismantled the layers of corporate insulation that had separated him from the impact of his decisions. They were an unlikely pair, the billionaire and the journalist who had once been adversaries. Their story wasn't perfect or simple. There were still arguments about corporate responsibility, about wealth and power, about the obligations that came with both. But those conversations, challenging as they were, strengthened rather than weakened the bond between them. In the end, Julian hadn't bought Olivia's silence or her approval. Instead, he'd earned her respect and eventually her heart, not with his wealth, but with his willingness to change, to listen, to see the world through her eyes. And Olivia, who had always believed in truth above all else, discovered a new truth, that sometimes people are more complex than the stories we tell about them, and second chapters can be more meaningful than first impressions.